The retired Marine's chair crashed backward so hard that everyone in the restaurant turned to look. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. He just stood there staring at me from across the room, his face drained of color, like he'd seen a ghost. Then he whispered one word. "Reaper." My husband dropped his fork. His sister Karen blinked twice. The waitress froze beside our table holding a basket of warm rolls. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the kind that comes from danger. The kind that comes from the past catching up with you when you've spent years hoping it wouldn't. The strange thing is that 5 minutes earlier I had been worrying about something completely different. I had been worrying about Karen. Again. The dinner was supposed to be simple. Tom's mother was turning 70. The family had reserved a private room at the famous steakhouse in downtown Colorado Springs. It was a Friday evening in late September, one of those cool Colorado nights when people start wearing light jackets after sunset. I almost didn't go. But Tom insisted. "It's Mom's birthday, Sarah." So I went. By 6:30 the room was packed with relatives. Tom's brother, Karen and her husband, several cousins, a few neighbors. Everyone talking at once, everyone drinking wine and telling stories, everyone except me. I mostly listened. That's what I'd learned to do over the years. Tom's family liked talking about themselves. Karen especially. Karen was 52, loud, confident, and convinced she was the smartest person in every room. If someone bought a new car, Karen had bought a better one. If someone took a vacation, Karen had gone somewhere nicer. If someone had a story, Karen had a bigger one. And for reasons I never fully understood, she absolutely loved making me the punchline. The first few years I tried fighting back. Later I stopped. It wasn't worth the energy. At least that's what I told myself. The truth was more complicated. I spent enough years dealing with real problems. Family drama felt exhausting. Dinner started well enough. We ordered drinks. The steaks arrived. Tom's mother opened gifts. People laughed. For a while I thought maybe Karen would behave herself. Then somebody asked me a harmless question. "So Sarah, what did you do before working at the insurance office?" I should have lied. Instead, I answered honestly. "I was in the army." Karen sighed dramatically. "Here we go." She leaned back in her chair. The army stories. A few people laughed nervously. Tom stared at his plate. He always did that when Karen started something. I waited. Karen smiled. "You know Tom never talks about that stuff." I shrugged. "There's not much to say." That should have ended it. Instead, she rolled her eyes. "At least try to act normal tonight." The table got quiet. I remember hearing the clink of ice in somebody's glass. "No one here is impressed by army fairy tales." I smiled. "Good." That irritated her more than arguing ever could. Karen leaned forward. "So what was your big bad nickname?" A couple people chuckled. She wasn't finished. "What was it, Barbie?" More laughter. Tom finally looked up. "Karen," but she waved him off. "No, seriously." She pointed toward me. "Every soldier has a nickname, right?" I set my water glass down carefully. The room waited. I don't know why I answered. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was annoyed. Or maybe after all those years I was simply done pretending part of my life never happened. I looked directly at her. "They called me Reaper." Nothing happened. For 1 second. Maybe 2. The table looked confused. Karen smirked. Then came the crash. A chair hitting hardwood. Everyone turned. The man at the bar was standing. Late 60s, gray hair, broad shoulders despite his age. "Marina veteranhat." His eyes never left mine. He walked toward our table, slowly. The restaurant had gone almost completely silent. When he reached us, he looked like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Neither could I, because I knew exactly who he was. Jack Turner. I hadn't seen him in almost 18 years, not since Afghanistan. "Jack," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "You really are alive." Nobody at the table understood what was happening. Karen looked irritated. Tom looked confused. Jack ignored both of them. "I attended your memorial service." A chill ran down my spine. "I know." His eyes glistened. For a moment I thought the old Marine might actually cry. Instead, he laughed. One short, stunned laugh. "I'll be damned." Tom stood up. "Do you two know each other?" Jack looked at him. Then back at me. Then at Karen. The expression on his face changed. Suddenly he seemed to understand the situation. The jokes. The mocking. The disrespect. All of it. Karen crossed her arms. "What's the big deal?" Jack stared at her, long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then he said something that silenced the entire room. "If you knew who this woman really is." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Jack looked back at me. I gave a tiny shake of my head. Please don't. Not here. Not now. He understood. After all these years, he still understood. So he nodded. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me a business card. His hand trembled slightly. Call me. I looked at the card. Turner Security Consulting. Colorado Springs. He leaned closer. His voice dropped low enough that only I could hear. There's something you need to know. My stomach tightened. What? Jack glanced toward Tom, then back at me. His expression turned serious. Dead serious. The wrong person has been telling your story. I felt my heartbeat quicken. What are you talking about? He looked around the room. Then he said the sentence that would change everything. We need to talk. He turned and walked away. Nobody stopped him. Nobody knew what to say. The birthday dinner never recovered. People tried returning to their conversations. Tried eating dessert. Tried pretending nothing strange had happened. But the mood was gone. Karen barely spoke. Tom drove us home in silence. And at 10:47 that night, as I sat alone in my kitchen staring at Jack's business card, my phone rang. It was him. The first words out of his mouth made my blood run cold. Sarah, he said, I finally figured out who's been taking credit for one of your missions. I gripped the phone tighter. Who? There was a long pause. Then Jack answered. And the name he gave me was the last person I ever expected to hear. The name Jack gave me was Tom, my husband. I sat frozen at the kitchen table long after the call ended. The digital clock above the stove read 11:14 p.m. The dishwasher hummed quietly. Outside, a cold Colorado wind rattled the fence in our backyard. And all I could think was, number. There had to be some mistake. Tom wasn't perfect, God knows nobody is. But stealing military stories. Stealing mine. That didn't make sense. I barely slept. Around 2 a.m, I got out of bed and wandered into the living room. The house was dark except for the glow of the television. Tom had fallen asleep in his recliner, one arm hanging over the side, a half-empty beer on the end table. I stood there watching him. This man had been my husband for 16 years. We'd survived layoffs, moves, medical scares, the death of my father, the loss of his. You don't spend that many years with someone without believing you know them. Yet suddenly I wasn't sure. The next morning I called in sick. I told my supervisor at the insurance office I wasn't feeling well. That wasn't entirely a lie. By 9:30, I was sitting inside a coffee shop near Garden of the Gods waiting for Jack. He arrived carrying a worn leather folder. The same serious expression from the restaurant remained on his face. He sat across from me, ordered black coffee, then got right to the point. You need to see this. He slid several printed pages across the table. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw Tom's photograph. My stomach dropped. The page belonged to a veterans charity website. There was Tom, smiling, wearing a blazer, standing behind a podium. The headline read, Community Leader Shares Lessons from Military Service. I frowned. Tom wasn't in the military. Jack nodded. I know. I kept reading. The article described a rescue operation in Afghanistan. A dangerous mission involving wounded soldiers trapped after an explosion. Every detail felt familiar. Because it was. I had lived it. My hands started shaking. Not dramatically. Just enough that I had to put the papers down. Where did you get this? Jack opened the folder. There are more. There were. A lot more. Articles. Event flyers. Photos. Fundraising campaigns. Speaking engagements. For years, Tom had been telling versions of my experiences. Not exactly. He changed details. Changed dates. Changed locations. But the core stories were mine. Every single one. I stared at the documents. My chest felt tight, like someone was slowly sitting on it. Why would he do this? Jack sighed. People like attention. I hated that answer because it sounded too simple. Yet the evidence sat right in front of me. Tom had become something of a local celebrity among veteran support organizations. Not nationally. Nothing huge, but enough. People knew him, invited him to events, asked him to speak, respected him, and apparently none of them knew the truth. I drove home feeling numb. Tom was working remotely that day. I found him in the home office, typing emails, completely relaxed. For a moment I almost walked away. Maybe I didn't want the answer. Maybe I wanted to keep believing there was an explanation. Instead, I closed the office door. He looked up. Everything okay? I placed the printed article on his desk. His eyes landed on the page, and something changed. Just for a second. A tiny flash of panic. Then it disappeared. That frightened me more than anything, because innocent people usually look confused. Tom looked prepared. "Where did you get this?" he asked. I stared at him. "Is it true?" He leaned back. Didn't answer. "Tom?" Still nothing. Then he sighed. A long, tired sigh. Like I was inconveniencing him. "You shouldn't be digging through things you don't understand." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Those are my stories." He rubbed his forehead. "They're stories." "No." My voice cracked. "They're my life." He stood up. For the first time I noticed he wasn't denying anything. Not once. "They helped people." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the alternative was crying. "You stole them." Tom crossed his arms. Nobody got hurt. I stared at the man I'd shared a bed with for 16 years, and suddenly he felt like a stranger. "What happened to you?" His expression hardened. No one wanted to hear from a middle-aged insurance worker. The sentence hit harder than I expected. Because now I understood. This wasn't about helping veterans, or charity, or inspiration. This was about recognition, about feeling important. Tom continued. "You never wanted the attention, so that makes it okay." He looked away. And that's when I realized something. He truly didn't think he'd done anything wrong. That terrified me. I left before the conversation became uglier. For the next few days, I walked through life like someone underwater. Work, groceries, laundry. The ordinary routines felt strangely distant. Meanwhile, things got worse. Karen somehow found out about the restaurant incident. Within days, she started making jokes online. Nothing direct. Nothing she could get in trouble for. Just little comments. Memes. Sarcastic posts. References to secret commandos and imaginary heroes. Friends sent screenshots. I ignored them. Mostly. But late at night, I'd read them. And everyone felt like a paper cut. Small. Yet painful. The hardest part wasn't Karen. It was the memories. Jack had reopened a door I'd spent years keeping shut. Afghanistan. Dust. Heat. Fear. The smell of diesel fuel. The sound helicopters make before sunrise. Faces I'd spent years trying not to remember. One afternoon, I found myself sitting alone in my car outside a Walmart parking lot, crying. Not because of Tom. Not because of Karen. Because I was exhausted. Exhausted from carrying things nobody could see. Exhausted from pretending they never happened. That evening, Jack called again. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "You okay?" he asked. "No." "Good." I frowned. What kind of answer is that? The honest kind? For the first time in days, I smiled. Jack continued. "You don't have to fight if you don't want to." "I don't." "That's a lie." I knew he was right. Part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me wanted peace. But another part couldn't accept what Tom had done. Not anymore. Before hanging up, Jack told me one more thing. Something that made my pulse quicken. "There are people willing to help." "What people?" "The ones who were there." The line went quiet. Then he added, "And Sarah." "Yeah." Karen isn't the only one who knew. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Because if that was true, then this betrayal was much bigger than I thought. 3 days later, a cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was an invitation. Tom Bennett, Veteran Leadership Excellence Award. Denver Marriott Tech Center. Formal banquet. Saturday evening. I read it twice. Then a third time. And suddenly I understood exactly where this story was heading. I read the banquet invitation at the kitchen counter while Tom stood 10 feet away making a turkey sandwich. He had no idea I was holding it. He was humming spreading Duke's mayo on wheat bread, acting like his whole world wasn't built on something stolen. Finally, he looked over. "Mail come." I held up the envelope. His face changed. Not much. Just enough. "Oh," he said, "that. When were you planning to tell me?" He put the knife down. "It's just a charity thing." "It's an award." He shrugged. "They give those out all the time." I almost laughed. There it was again. That casual tone. That little trick he had of making something ugly sound harmless. "Are you speaking?" He wiped his hands on a paper towel. "Probably. About Afghanistan." His eyes narrowed. "Sarah, don't start." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not rage exactly. More like grief finally standing up straight. "You used to ask me why I never talked about it," I said. He sighed. "Because you didn't." "No, because I couldn't." He stared toward the backyard window. The old cottonwood tree was dropping leaves all over the grass. Tom hated that tree. Every fall he threatened to cut it down. Every fall I talked him out of it. Strange the things you think about when your marriage is cracking in half. I placed the invitation on the counter. If you go up there and tell that story again, I won't stay quiet. He turned slowly. For the first time, he looked angry. You don't have proof. 4 words. That's all it took. Not, I didn't do it. Not, I'm sorry. Just, you don't have proof. I remember feeling cold. You've thought about this. His mouth tightened. I've thought about a lot of things. Karen knew, didn't she? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I took my purse from the chair. Tom stepped closer. Sarah, I stopped but didn't turn around. Be careful, he said. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Not like a warning from a husband. Like a warning from someone protecting himself. I drove to a Safeway parking lot because I didn't know where else to go. I sat there watching people push carts through yellow leaves in bright afternoon sunlight. An older man loaded Diet Coke into his trunk. A mother buckled a toddler into a car seat. Life just kept moving. That felt unfair somehow. I called Jack. He answered on the second ring. I need help. He didn't ask for details. Come over. Jack lived in a small ranch house near Security Widefield south of Colorado Springs. American flag on the porch, Marine Corps decal on his truck, a ceramic frog by the front steps wearing tiny sunglasses which struck me as so ridiculous I almost cried. Inside his dining table was already covered with folders. Emails, old photographs, printed screenshots, a legal pad full of notes. Did you know, I asked? Some of it. How long? He looked ashamed. About a week before the restaurant. That hurt, but not as much as I expected. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wasn't sure it was you. He pulled out a photograph. Grainy. Faded. A group of tired soldiers standing beside a vehicle under a hard blue sky. I was in the back row. Younger, thinner, covered in dust. Not smiling. I barely recognized myself. Jack tapped the photo. After the explosion reports got messy, names got left out. Some things were classified, some were just incompetence. That sounds about right. He almost smiled. Then he slid another paper toward me. This is where Tom messed up. It was a transcript from one of his speeches. I read the highlighted paragraph. My throat tightened. Tom had described a detail nobody should know. A green bandana tied around a wounded soldier's arm. I remembered that bandana. It was mine. I had used it as a tourniquet because we were out of supplies. No public article ever mentioned it. How did he know that? Jack asked. I closed my eyes. Because I told him. Not all at once. Over the years. Late at night. During bad dreams. In broken pieces while sitting on the bathroom floor. I had given my husband the most private parts of my pain. And he had turned them into stage material. That realization nearly broke me. For 2 days I couldn't do anything useful. Jack called old contacts. I ignored messages. Karen posted another joke online. Something about classified casseroles and suburban war legends. It was cruel. But I admit it was also weirdly specific enough to be almost funny. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the creativity. Instead, I blocked her. Then unblocked her. Then blocked her again. By Thursday, I was a mess. At work, I entered a client's zip code wrong 3 times. My supervisor, Denise, called me into her office. She was 61, wore reading glasses on a chain, and kept peppermint candies in a crystal dish. Sarah, she said gently, you look like you slept in a bus station. That made me laugh. Then I started crying. Poor Denise didn't know what to do. She handed me tissues and shut the door. I didn't tell her everything. Just enough. Her face changed when I said Tom had taken something from me that wasn't money. Then don't let him keep it, she said. Simple words. But they landed. That evening I went back to Jack's house. This time 3 other people were there. Marcus Bell, a former Army medic living in Pueblo. Linda Reyes, retired military police now working school security in Fountain. And Eddie Lawson, who walked with a cane and still managed to make the room feel safer. I hadn't seen any of them in years. For a minute, nobody spoke. Then Marcus opened his arms. Come here, Mitchell. I stepped into that hug and held on longer than I meant to. No one made it awkward. That was the thing about people who had seen you at your worst. They didn't need explanations. We spent hours building a timeline. Dates. Locations. Who was present? Who could verify what? Linda had old emails. Marcus had a photograph from the aid station. Eddie remembered the radio call sign and the mission nickname. Jack had his own statement. There were still gaps. Plenty of them. This wasn't going to be clean. Tom had years of speeches, friendly donors, polished photos, and a charming public face. I had scattered memories and a past I could barely talk about. At one point, I stood outside on Jack's porch, breathing cold air into my lungs. I thought about driving home, packing a suitcase, leaving Colorado, letting Tom have his applause. Because the truth was, I was tired before the fight even started. Then Eddie came outside. He leaned on his cane beside me. "You don't owe anybody a performance," he said. "I know. But you do owe yourself the truth." I looked at him. He shrugged. "And maybe a decent lawyer." I laughed. A real laugh this time. The first one in days. By Friday morning we had a plan. Not a dramatic one. No shouting. No ambush with fake police or wild accusations. Just truth, documentation, witnesses, and timing. Tom's banquet was Saturday night at the Denver Marriott Tech Center. He would stand in front of donors, veterans, politicians, and local news. He would tell my story one more time. Only this time, the people who knew the truth would be in the room. Saturday afternoon, I stood in my bedroom holding 2 dresses. A black one. A navy one. The black felt too much like a funeral. The navy felt steady. So I wore that. Tom came in while I was fastening my earrings. He stopped. "You're coming." I looked at him in the mirror. "Of course." He studied my face, trying to read it, trying to see how much I knew. Then he smiled. That smooth public smile. "Good," he said. "Try not to make things uncomfortable." I picked up my purse. For once I smiled back. "Oh, Tom." I walked past him toward the front door. Uncomfortable is the least of your problems. By the time we reached Denver, my stomach felt like it was full of gravel. The banquet was being held at the Denver Marriott Tech Center, a place I'd driven past dozens of times but never entered. Valet attendants moved briskly under bright lights. Guests stepped out of SUVs and luxury sedans. Men in suits, women in cocktail dresses, veterans wearing service pins on their lapels. Tom looked completely at home. That should have been my first clue. This wasn't new for him. He'd been living in this world for years. The attention, the admiration, the applause. As we walked into the ballroom, people greeted him immediately. "Tom, great to see you." "Looking forward to your speech." He shook hands and smiled. Remembered names. Accepted compliments. Watching him was surreal. Like seeing an actor perform a role he'd rehearsed so many times he no longer remembered it wasn't real. I stayed quiet. A few people nodded politely to me. Most didn't know who I was. That was fine. For years I'd preferred it that way. The ballroom held around 300 people. Round tables covered in white linen. American flags near the stage. Large screens on either side. A banner hanging above the podium. Honoring leadership, service, and sacrifice. The irony almost made me laugh. Karen was already there. Front row table. Champagne glass in hand. Looking pleased with herself. When she spotted me, her eyebrows lifted. "Oh," she forced a smile. "You came." "Looks that way." She glanced around. "Don't do anything embarrassing." I smiled. "Funny, Tom said the same thing." Karen's smile disappeared. "Good." I took my seat. Table 16, near the back. Exactly where I wanted to be. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. One text message. "Jack, we're here." I looked toward the ballroom entrance. 4 familiar faces walked inside. Jack, Marcus, Linda, Eddie, and behind them were 2 more veterans I hadn't expected. People who had been there. People who remembered. For the first time all evening, I felt steady. Not confident. Not comfortable. Just steady. Dinner began. Salad. Chicken. Coffee. The usual banquet routine. Speeches followed. Sponsors. Board members. Community leaders. Each one talking about service and integrity. Every mention of integrity felt sharper than the last. Then the awards started. Several deserving people were recognized. A firefighter. A volunteer coordinator. A Gold Star family advocate. Each received warm applause. Then came Tom. The MC stepped onto the stage. Tonight's Veteran Leadership Excellence Award goes to a man whose courage and dedication have inspired countless Americans. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. The audience applauded. Tom walked to the stage. Confident. Relaxed. Smiling. Karen nearly jumped out of her chair clapping. The award was placed in his hands. Photos were taken. More applause. Then Tom stepped to the microphone. The room grew quiet. And he began. At first it was harmless. Thanking sponsors. Thanking organizers. Thanking family. Then came the story. My story. The one I'd already read in transcripts. The one he'd been telling for years. A rescue mission. An explosion. Wounded soldiers. Impossible choices. He delivered it beautifully. That's what made it so disgusting. He sounded sincere. People leaned forward. Some even wiped away tears. And then he reached the part about the green bandana. My bandana. The one I'd wrapped around a bleeding soldier's arm. I looked around the room. People were captivated, believing every word. Tom paused dramatically, then said, "That day changed my life forever. Number, it changed mine." The applause started before he'd even finished. And that was when Jack stood up. Not loudly, not aggressively. He simply stood. A few heads turned. Tom noticed. His smile faltered. Just slightly. Jack spoke clearly. "Liar." The ballroom went silent. You could hear silverware clinking somewhere near the kitchen. Tom blinked. "I'm sorry." Jack didn't sit down. "You heard me." Several organizers began moving toward him. Then Marcus stood. And Linda. And Eddie. One after another. Not angry. Not shouting. Just standing. The sight alone changed the room. Because people instinctively recognized something important was happening. Tom looked toward the event staff. Toward Karen. Toward anyone who might save him. Nobody moved fast enough. Jack stepped into the aisle. "You stole that story." Gasps rippled through the audience. Tom laughed nervously. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No." Jack pointed toward me. "There hasn't." For a second, every head in the room turned. Toward table 16. Toward me. Tom's face lost color. The room seemed to shrink. I stood slowly. Every instinct told me to run. Instead, I walked forward. One step. Then another. My heels clicking against the ballroom floor. Nobody spoke. By the time I reached the front, my heart felt like it might break through my ribs. The MC looked completely lost. Tom looked terrified. "Good." I stopped beside the stage. Jack handed a folder to one of the organizers. Inside were witness statements, photographs, emails, records. The organizer opened it, started reading. His expression changed immediately. Then another organizer joined him. Then another. The whispers began. Tom kept trying to smile, trying to maintain control. But the ground beneath him was already disappearing. Linda stepped forward. "I was there." Marcus followed. "So was I." Eddie raised his hand. "Me too." One by one they spoke. Simple facts. No exaggeration. No drama. Just truth. And truth turned out to be more powerful than any speech. The large screens behind the stage suddenly changed. Someone from the technical crew had loaded the photographs. Old deployment photos. Mission records. Images from Afghanistan. My name. My face. My unit. My history. The audience watched in stunned silence. Then came the final blow. Karen. She'd been sitting frozen in her chair, until one organizer walked directly toward her, holding printed emails. Emails she'd exchanged with Tom. Emails discussing the speeches, the stories, the lies, the cover-up. The organizer didn't even need to explain. Karen's face explained everything. "Oh my God," someone whispered nearby. Tom tried one last time. He stepped toward me. "Sarah, please." I held up my hand. He stopped talking. For 16 years I'd listened. For 16 years I'd given him the benefit of the doubt. I was finished. The award committee chair approached the microphone. His voice was calm, professional, devastating. "In light of information presented tonight, this award is being withdrawn effective immediately." The room erupted. Not cheering, not shouting, just hundreds of people reacting at once. Shock, disappointment, disgust. The kind of sound that comes when trust collapses. Tom stood alone on the stage, still holding an award that no longer belonged to him. And for the first time all night, nobody was looking at him. They were looking at me, the person who had actually lived the story. The person who had spent years trying not to tell it. The chairwoman quietly asked if I wanted to speak. Every nerve in my body screamed no. Then I looked at the veterans standing behind me, the friends who had shown up, the people who remembered. And I stepped toward the microphone. I stood at the microphone looking out at nearly 300 people. For a moment I couldn't speak, not because I was afraid, because I was overwhelmed. The ballroom was completely silent. Tom stood off to one side of the stage. Karen sat frozen at her table. The award committee members were whispering among themselves, and all those eyes were waiting. I looked down at the microphone, then back up. "My name is Sarah Mitchell." The room remained silent. I spent years trying not to tell these stories. A few people nodded. I took a breath. The truth is, I never wanted attention. That part was easy, because it was true. I never had. When I came home from Afghanistan, I wanted normal. A small house, a steady job, a quiet life. I wanted grocery shopping and football games and arguing about what movie to watch on Friday nights. I wanted ordinary. For a while I got it. Mostly. The audience listened carefully. No phones. No side conversations. Just listening. The people who served with me know something important. I looked toward Jack. Marcus. Linda. Eddie. They know that nobody succeeds alone. Several veterans nodded. You survive because someone helps you. Another nod. You come home because somebody else does their job. I paused. And sometimes you come home carrying things that never really leave. The room understood, especially the older veterans. I could see it in their faces. The recognition, the memories, the understanding that doesn't require explanation. I glanced toward Tom. He couldn't meet my eyes. Good. For years I'd wondered whether he understood what those memories cost. Now I had my answer. He didn't. At least not enough. I continued. People often think courage means running toward danger. I shook my head. Sometimes courage means telling the truth after you've spent years hiding from it. The room stayed quiet. I wasn't trying to inspire anyone. I wasn't trying to deliver some perfect speech. I was simply telling the truth. For once. And strangely, that felt easier than all the years of silence. When I finished, there was no dramatic ending. No clever line. No grand gesture. I simply thanked the people who had stood beside me. Then I stepped away from the microphone. The applause started slowly. One table, then another, then the entire ballroom. Not the loudest applause I'd ever heard, but probably the most meaningful. Because it wasn't for a story. It was for the truth. Afterward, dozens of people approached. Veterans, military spouses, parents. A retired Air Force nurse hugged me and cried. A Vietnam veteran shook my hand and said, "About time somebody stood up for you." I laughed at that. Because he wasn't wrong. Jack stayed close most of the evening. At one point, we stood together near the coffee station watching people leave. "You okay?" he asked. I thought about it, then nodded. Better than I expected. Good. I looked around the ballroom. Tom was gone. So was Karen. Neither had stayed. I wasn't surprised. Some exits are easier than apologies. The drive back to Colorado Springs felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, maybe years, my shoulders weren't carrying quite so much weight. The future was still uncertain. The marriage certainly was. But uncertainty felt different from deception. At least uncertainty was honest. 3 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Tom didn't fight much. Maybe because he knew he couldn't. Maybe because the evidence had become impossible to deny. Or maybe because he finally understood that trust, once broken, that badly doesn't magically repair itself. The divorce process wasn't pleasant. Nobody should pretend otherwise. Lawyers cost money. Paperwork takes forever. There were difficult conversations, awkward meetings, plenty of sadness. Even when you're leaving the right person, grief still shows up. That's something nobody tells you. Karen called twice. I didn't answer. Then she sent a long email. Half apology, half excuse. I read it once, then deleted it. Not out of anger, just exhaustion. I was done carrying her choices too. Months passed. Winter arrived. Then spring. Life settled into a different rhythm. I kept working at the insurance office. Denise still kept peppermint candies in her dish. Jack became a regular friend. Every now and then we'd meet for coffee. Mostly we talked about ordinary things. Weather, baseball, bad traffic. The older I got, the more I appreciated ordinary conversations. I also started attending a local veteran support group. At first I sat quietly, listening, the way I always had. But eventually I began talking. Not about everything, just enough. A memory here, a lesson there. The strange thing was that speaking honestly hurt less than hiding. I wish I'd learned that sooner. About 6 months after the banquet, I was invited to speak at a small veterans event in Pueblo. Nothing fancy. Maybe 60 people. Folding chairs. Coffee in styrofoam cups. American flags near the stage. The kind of gathering that feels real. Toward the end, someone asked what lesson I'd learned from everything that happened. I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, honor isn't about recognition. The room grew quiet. It's not about awards. I smiled. It's not even about being remembered. Several people nodded. Honor is doing the right thing when nobody's watching. I paused, and telling the truth when it would be easier not to. That answer seemed to satisfy them. It satisfied me too, because for a long time I thought revenge would feel exciting, victorious, maybe even joyful. The truth is it felt quieter than that, more like setting down a heavy box you'd been carrying for years. Not happiness, relief. And sometimes relief is enough. Today, when I look back, I don't think about the banquet first. I don't think about the award, or Karen, or even Tom. I think about the moment Jack's chair hit the floor. The moment somebody looked at me and remembered who I really was. Not because of a nickname. Not because of a mission. But because the truth still existed somewhere. Waiting. If you've ever watched someone take credit for your sacrifices, I hope you remember this. The truth may move slowly, but it has a way of catching up. And if this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences. Sometimes sharing them helps more than we realize. The end.